we don't win.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
And just, you're gonna
I
call
haven't
that
been in there
meeting?
years
Yes.
because you just got so hard to get customer service, and she's like,
On top of it,
okay.
I beat on incest.
Okay, we're ready? Everybody ready? Okay. Make sure I have the right agenda. Okay. Calling this meeting to order of the Unified Land Development Code Review Committee today, Thursday, July 18th at 5:40 p.m. Susan, would you like to do the roll call?
Sure. Chair Standish. Here. Vice Chair Davis.
Here.
Committee Member Heisler.
Here.
Committee Member Brown.
Here.
Committee Member Ward.
Here.
Okay, I'd like to ask for approval of the agenda, and then also, after approval of the agenda, Committee Member Warren has a short comment. If you don't have any objections, is that acceptable? Yes? It's
Yes.
short
Well,
comment,
short, you
right?
don't want to make
Short.
an agenda item?
No, it's supposed to, no, John, don't push my buttons. It's gonna be short. We're just calling approval of the agenda. All those in favor? Aye. Okay, 5-0. Okay, Mr. Warren?
Yeah, what I wanted to do, I wanted to propose,
Oh, time's up.
exactly. I wanted to propose a protocol for the meeting, because especially when you go back and you look at the videos and audios, it's very disorganized, and sometimes when, basically the way one person gets the floor from another person is to interrupt. And I don't think it's fair to place the burden on Virginia to make a decision when somebody should stop speaking and someone else should start speaking. So if we had a protocol in place, these decisions would be easy to make. Now, I brought these in so none of us had to sit there incessantly with our hands up in the air, which can get quite tiring. Now, when you put it forward, that means you want to speak. I suggest the following protocol. When someone takes the floor, they have the floor, and they have it as long as they wish in order to get their point across. However, as soon as another committee member wishes to start speaking and puts their coupling forward, at that point, the time clock starts to tick, and the person that has the floor must relinquish it within 3 minutes, okay? At that point in time, the person who wished to take the floor gets to speak. Now, if there are no other couplings up there, that person can continue speaking. If the person that was speaking wants to add more, they can put their coupling out there, which limits what we'll call, for the sake of this conversation, the interrupter to 3 minutes. Now, as long as you put your coupling out there, as long as there's another coupling out there, the person that's speaking is limited to 3 minutes, and then it goes to the next person for their 3 minutes, and it can be longer if no one else has a coupling out there. This way, there's an order in which everybody gets a chance to speak. There's no going off in a different direction. I find oftentimes we go off in a different direction, and I don't want to come back to where we were because it ruins the forward motion of the meeting. And this way, Virginia doesn't have to make any unilateral decisions as to, okay, we've heard enough on that subject, let's move on. So I would like to throw that out on the floor as a protocol for the meeting. The only exceptions would be, of course, you guys at that table would have the ability to interrupt anybody at any time because that's what you're here for.
Okay,
So-
my comments is, as chairman, I do have a unilateral decision to cut something short. I'm not waiving that right.
No, you don't
No,
waive that right.
I know. We're not going to have filibuster share where we go on for 15 or 20 minutes on topic because we're advisory committee. But let me just say this also, what happens is I notice when people do put their PVC, their little coupling out there, they don't pull it back in. And that's what makes it hard for me to know. So,
Well, everybody got to remember to do that, that's all.
right, and that's also what makes it hard to see who's speaking and who's finished. So we tried this before, let's go with it again, but let's be respectful of the time. We're not gonna go on for 20 minutes. You know, everyone has something to say, we're volunteering, we'll go with this, but let's try and keep it to no more than 5 minutes at the most on the topic. And like you said, if you wanna go in, if somebody puts their coupling out there, then that's that term. But when 3 people put their coupling out at the same time, I will be saying who will be speaking.
Yeah, I think we ought to keep the chair, whoever is chairing the meeting, with meeting control.
Right, so we'll use this system so I can visually see. I just ask that you put it back in. Let's keep it to 5 minutes and we'll go with it. And you'll comment.
So when somebody else puts their coupling out there, the speaker gets another 5 minutes even though they've had 5 minutes?
No, if you're talking, no, everybody, this isn't an ongoing conversation. We need to try and be consistent. You make your comment, somebody else wants to make their comment, they can make a comment, and let's just pay attention to how much time we've spent on a topic also. Because again, we're advisory, you know, let's just go with it and see what happens, all right? So we'll start with, and Mark is probably going to be more so running this meeting, right, when I say running, but keeping us on topic tonight because of the FEMA. Well, let's, before we do that, let's get approval of the minutes. Let's continue with that, right? And then I'll get back to Mark.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes.
Someone want to second that? I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, 5-0, minutes are approved. Okay, any changes? We're fine with the agenda as it is. Mark is going to, we're going with this is all old business because we are given this information before the review and told that it would be coming up. Mark is going to walk us through flood insurance, and he's going to, it's a lengthy topic, so he is going to be directing the conversation on this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have to apologize for the committee tonight because unfortunately I have to leave at about 10 to 7 to head to a Western Communities meeting that was called. And normally I would have this meeting take precedence over that, except that the topic at the Western Community meeting is FEMA and the flood insurance maps and the overall effort in the county to kind of address those. So I really think it's an important meeting. Obviously, that doesn't mean the meeting has to stop. You guys can move forward, and Jim and Brady can assist you if that's what you want to do. In talking with the chair, though, the flood insurance can be a very lengthy topic. My thought was that we would try to at least do the first 2 items under old business, but if we're making progress, we're not limited to that. So that would be the flood insurance maps and the pain management clinics. Probably more likely, a longer discussion is going to be needed on ULDC Article 87, because that's a lengthy article with a lot of information, and so I would say that definitely should wait till our next meeting. And then, of course, we kept on the discussion of vermiculture and other agricultural issues, and if you remember, we did that pretty quickly at the end of our last meeting, but that was where Jim wanted to make you aware of some of the interesting opinions, interpretations we're having to come up with due to some interesting proposals that people are looking at for lots that actually grows. It seems that 3 out of every 4 zoning determinations or ULDC determinations that we're required to make deal with either a soil amendment or some kind of, or almost bordering solid waste collection and that kind of thing. So, there are a number of issues there, but, that I could think if, unless we move quickly tonight, you want to get into that, even though I'm not here, we can do that. So, having said,
Good question.
I'm sorry.
Is Steve Joey going with you tonight, or is one of the town?
I didn't get a
council
chance to call him, I don't know if he is or not.
Okay.
I was going to try to call him, and I never got a chance to.
I didn't know if he even knew about it.
I think he gets noticed, he gets the same information, so I would hope he'll be there too.
How about town council? Don't you have one designee on
I
that?
believe Councilman Rocket is the designee, he's the voting member. I'm not a voting member, I just vote
Do
for
you need to
contract.
go, John? It might be something, that's what I'm saying,
I went over the flood ordinance and the maps with Steve,
Mhm.
and it's a nightmare.
Yes, yes.
But, you know, it's really mostly the town. The town's the one that would adopt the ordinance. So I think as long as one of the councilmen goes, that's the main thing.
Well, I mean, you know, yeah, you've been to them before, you know how they, so, I mean, it's at Wellington Village Hall, so
Would you, when you leave here, would you mind calling Councilman Watkins?
Sure.
Asking if he's planning to go?
sure, I can do that, absolutely. All right, so let's start, you want to get into that, the flood issue, flood insurance issues now? Okay. There is a lot to this. Right now, it's in two phases. FEMA has, and they're apparently quite late in terms of, I guess the county's been waiting some time for the new firm maps. And FEMA dropped them on us just this, a couple months ago. And that's the first part, adopting that, because what that does is that sets the tone for flood insurance matters and things like that. And the issue that I have seen so far in all the conference calls and meetings that I've been to is that nobody's happy with the rate maps that they've been handed by FEMA. There was a lot of concern about the validity, what data they were using, and apparently it's FEMA in conjunction with a couple of consultants out of Atlanta. The one that FEMA was using, I believe, for this project is AECOM, which is a big national engineering firm. And the League of Cities have been trying to put together, to their credit, a consortium or at least a group to kind of make sure that, you know, the cities are all united. But it is incumbent upon each city to do their own review. And as you may be aware, you know, the town is kind of in between its engineers. Thankfully, on Tuesday night, town council approved the contract with our traffic engineering, our surveying, and in this case, our general town engineer, who is Kesher Barretts and Associates. So we're going to be trying to finalize contracts tomorrow, and I advised town council that it's a project I really need to get them on so they can start to do the review. As Member Ryan indicated, right now Steve Yohe has copies of our maps, and he was looking at them. As you know, Steve's an engineer, but he also had the district's engineering vendor, who was Urban Anthony, and they were doing some preliminary review. There was supposed to have been a conference call with all the cities. We've had two so far. This was going to be the third yesterday at 9 o'clock. However, we got a cancellation notice that they're not going to be doing it. Big, long process. I'm not going to bore you or go into it, but apparently they have community-wide meetings with people. They have meetings that they come down, and over the next 6 months, they work with you to try to establish the maps if you have issues. We got a letter about a little more than, I'd say more like 45 days ago, where they were looking for preliminary comments. I couldn't offer any due to the fact that I didn't have an engineer turn to them and say, review these maps. So we've heard two stories. We've heard it's important to get them comments. We've heard no, the comments don't really mean all that much. You don't have to worry about that. I think some cities who have had engineers on board, either via consultants or staff engineers, have been looking at it and trying to take the lead and at least, you know, talk to FEMA from their standpoint. The two conference calls have been pretty acrimonious, to say the least. There's been a lot of issues. There's concern about putting the cities in a bad public position with, you know, with the citizens if the maps aren't up to speed or aren't correct. But, you know, FEMA seems to be very process-oriented, you know, and this is the process is how we're going to do it. So, you know, we have to work within the confines of what they're doing. Having said that, so we're going to go through that. It's probably going to be a year before these maps are ultimately finalized and go into effect. However, as I indicated at our last meeting, the big issue is if it happens and they don't change, you know, close to 90% of the town is now in a flood zone, which we are currently not. And what that means is, you know, if you try to get a mortgage, you have to have flood insurance. What it further means is, however, the federal government tells you you're not required to be part of the flood insurance program. However, if you're not, then you can't get flood insurance when you go for a mortgage. Even the commercial lenders or the lenders associated with the feds will not give you a mortgage. What does that mean? It usually means you have to adopt floodplain regulations, floodproofing regulations that usually are of the nature of building, zoning, subdivision, those kinds of things. Jim and I have been talking about that and trying to come up with a strategy because you have in your packets tonight, you have the model ordinance that FEMA suggests through the state, and then we provided you with the Palm Beach County. I'm of the initial opinion that the town could go either way. The town could go ahead and try to adopt its own ordinance based upon the model. Or, as we do with a lot of other codes, we can simply adopt Palm Beach County's ordinance. We do have an interlocal agreement with the county for the review of building permits. We review zoning, they review building. So to me, it would seem that if we went ahead and adopted the county's ordinance, for lack of no ordinance on our part, when somebody came in with any kind of building issue, zoning issue, it would be us and the county reviewing it just as we do under our current interlocal agreement. Jim, on my behalf, put in a couple of calls to the county today, though, and the county is not seeing it that way, and which may be a problem that we're going to have to address later on down the line. But their feeling was, and Jim, I'll let you articulate it, and I'll jump back in. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, there isn't too much to articulate at this point. I called Bob Banks, who was the assistant county attorney that wrote the ordinance, and he spoke with Rebecca Caldwell, who is the director of planning, zoning, and building for the county, who is administering the ordinance on behalf of the county, and he asked her if we could just go under the county's ordinance. We feel that makes a lot of sense because Palm Beach County is administering building permits on behalf of the town, and really this is the rules and regulations under the floodplain ordinance are essentially those that would come into play as part of the building permit process. So now we're thinking that if the county's administering building permits on behalf of the town, so let's have them use the same flood ordinance that they are using to administer the permits for us. Rebecca Caldwell said since the county was at this point is only administering building permits and the town is implementing its own planning and zoning function, that she felt that the county that we could not go under the county's ordinance. I think that's still to be determined, and I think that we should pursue that option. And that's I just got that information today, so that's about all I can.
Can I ask you to clarify what I think you just said? You're saying that, I mean, typically it's easier, and it's done frequently, where you can just adopt the Palm Beach County ordinance. One, it saves you legal fees. Two, it saves you some financial. And you're saying that the county response was because they're doing building permits only, and the town does the planning and zoning. They're telling us not to use their ordinance?
They're telling us that we would not fall under their ordinance, that we would have to adopt our own.
But what prevents us from simply copying their ordinance and adopting it as our own?
Well,
Or you could adopt it by reference. You could adopt it by reference.
nothing-
I don't think that's her call to make.
That's why I said, that
Yeah,
seems.
nothing would, except that, I mean, we haven't gone through it to the extent of looking at how all the details of their ordinance might affect town residents. There may be some changes that we might want to make, so. We were just calling today to see if that was a possibility, and according to county administration, they would prefer not to at this point. So
This is off the topic a little bit, but it's something I'm going to have to reconcile with them because I've also been told by our code enforcement vendor that there are some, they don't do, for example, they don't serve as our building official for code issues. If we had a serious code issue where we have an unsafe structure or a dangerous situation, really our resolution only addresses building permits. And I do need the ability, if we ever had a situation or a case where I would, we would
We have
need,
an
we would need the
unsafe
services of a
structure.
building official, I can't have her saying, well, you can't use your code vendor because there's going to be one building official. And so, we're gonna have to address that with them, because it seems like they wanna have it, I mean, they are picking up all the building permit fees as a result of their review. I mean, we don't get any of the fees at all, the county gets it all for doing the building review and the inspections. So, I mean, this is the second thing now I'm hearing where it sounds problematic, and you just can't neuter the town and not have the services of a building official for other items. So I'm gonna need to look into that and try to resolve that. But why is it all that important when I'm telling you that you probably won't have the flood maps for another year? Well, obviously, the reason is you guys will probably be done with this assignment before those maps are funded. And I think the crucial thing that as a committee that you can advise the town council is, one, do you want to go with your own ordinance and have that drafted? Two, do you want to adopt the counties, and hopefully we don't have an issue with, with any political issue with working that out with them? Or three, do you want something in between? But I think that's the key thing, is we need to know where we're going. Now, I've heard from some folks, oh, we don't want to do our own floodplain ordinance or regulations, that's more bureaucratic, now the town's really getting out of control with, we're doing too much. But again, it seems to me, if we're not successful in this initial effort with the map review of the mapping and the floodplain designation, we don't have a choice. If somebody needs flood insurance and they're trying to get a mortgage, you've got to have the regulations in place in order to be part of the program. It's real clear in the FEMA flyers. I mean, I don't even think it's a question. You don't really have a choice in that. So we have to be able to have something in place. And my understanding is when this town incorporated, we adopted all of the county's codes as our codes. The only difference was when we went ahead and did like our own ULDC, then that took precedent over the county, because now we have our own code. So that's why Jim and I at first were thinking, well, if you all make a recommendation to council, and council wants to adopt the county's code for simplicity, if there was anything in there that's onerous, why not be able to do that? And then the county can do the review of the building under our normal local agreements, we would do the zoning as we always do.
Yeah, Virginia? Also, if you get into the meat of the ordinance, we would have to designate a flood zone administrator, and that person would be responsible for doing certain reviews and
Are they free?
certain paperwork, and
Water district?
obviously, if that we could impose upon the county to do that for us, that would be very helpful.
That's an important, very important point, isn't it?
Yeah, and I mean, and it seems to me like if we did that, I mean, if we were forced to do that, we would have our flood administrator, but then when it goes over for building permits, it would have to go through their flood administrator also, so that
Double the work.
could be duplication of effort and very frustrating for the town residents.
Yeah.
John first, then Howard.
Yeah, two quick comments. Steve told me that South Florida Water Management is considering pretty significant changes to their protocols for handling floodwater discharge, either making greater use of just opening the gates and letting it go out to tide instead of trying to put it into the stormwater treatment areas. That's number one. Number two, I didn't read through the county ordinance, but I did read through the FEMA model that they're gonna want the town to adopt. And it is so burdensome. I mean, they don't wanna recognize right to farm. They want permits for any non-residential farm building. And they want permits to include surveyor confirmation of property elevations in relation to whatever they determine is the,
Quite onerous.
and, they've got stuff where I mean, it's really, almost something that we want to ask citizens if they want to underwrite flood insurance in addition to windstorm, because going through FEMA, I mean, you've got two layers of bureaucracy. They want one layer at the town level, the administrator and the building official and all this paperwork. And if there's any variance with the requirements they set out, they want FEMA to approve over and above what the town is gonna do.
I stayed at the Holiday Inn last night, so I'm gonna give you the legal opinion, even though I'm not one, but I would not, I think pretty much they trump the state's ag laws once that happens.
Well, they made it real clear. Floodplain development permits or approvals shall be required for the following building structures and facilities that are now exempt from the Florida Building Code and any further exemptions provided by law which are subject to the requirements of this ordinance. And the second one they list is non-residential farm buildings on farms. And they reference a Florida statute, and it's the one that basically says everything that, would be on a farm. And they even will not exempt, and I hadn't heard of this before, chickees constructed by the Miccosukee tribe.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, because that's non-build, you need nothing for that.
Well, they're trumping it.
Yeah. Howard?
I don't know because I have not read anything, but I'm wondering if this is not, and Mark, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, if more isn't being made of this than it is. The feeling I'm getting is you can choose not to comply, but then of course you can't get flood insurance. Now, if I have a property where my principal dwelling, the residential dwelling, is high and dry and has all the elevation it needs to meet the FEMA requirements. However, I have several nursery greenhouses, I have a barn, all of which do not meet the elevation standards, okay? Does this mean that I can get flood insurance for my house, but I can't get flood insurance for all those non-residential farm buildings? Because if that's all this means, it's no big deal, because I don't think that the majority of agricultural uses out here in non-residential farm buildings need flood insurance for their greenhouses or aviaries or horse stables. If we have to do without that, no big deal maybe, rather than, as long as we can still get the principal residential dwelling approved.
Well, it depends where you are financially with the financing of your property. I'll read you two sections of this is their requirement in joining the National Flood Insurance Program. It said, federal mortgage insurance or loan guarantees, such as those written by the FHA and the Department of Veteran Affairs, will not be provided in identified flood hazard areas. So bingo, if you don't have, they're not even going to consider giving you a loan. Two, it says federally insured or regulated lending institutions such as banks and credit unions are allowed to make conventional loans for insurable buildings in flood hazard areas of non-participating communities. However, the lender must notify applicants that the property is in a flood hazard area and that the property is not eligible for federal disaster assistance. Some lenders may voluntarily choose to not make these loans.
Yeah, but if you can choose to get your residential dwelling permitted, correct? In other words, my house is where it is. If they declare that my address is in a flood zone, how does that affect me? I have to have the surveyor come in and show the elevation of the house, a survey which I already have from when it was built, submit it.
I can answer that, Howard.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, John, I'm going to speak first, and I know you want to speak.
Okay.
Does anyone here have flood insurance? Yes.
Yes.
I do too. And I have a little house that's smack in the middle of the flood zone, close to I-95, and my property did not flood. Okay, but I can tell you on the mortgage, and I can tell you what my neighbors have gone through. I'm sure you're all going to tell us what you had. I do have to have an elevation survey anytime I want to redo the mortgage. Good luck getting out of trying to not get flood insurance if you want a mortgage. It's almost impossible to get out of getting flood insurance, because you were asking, do I not have to?
Yeah, let me state it a different way. When I went for my mortgage, they would not give me a mortgage in relation to the fact that I had 10 acres. They gave me a mortgage only on the value of the house and the 1 acre surrounding the house. So in most agricultural situations within this town, I believe we're dealing with a residential dwelling and the acre around that residential dwelling, and the other 9 or 4 acres be dammed. If it's in the flood zone and all the non-residential farm buildings are lower than necessary, then we just don't get those, then they're never part of our insurance. I would lose my insurance on my baby hatching building, but I wouldn't lose it on my house because it's a whole separate thing. That's my question.
Okay, and I can say, Katie and John will probably speak to this, but I can tell you my experience. Again, I have somebody that lives right next door to me and has a super high elevation. They should not have been required of flood insurance, but because they were in the flood zone, mandatory flood insurance. So whatever you think you might not have to do, remember you're dealing with the government when we look at this stuff. John and then Katie.
Yeah, this, as I read the ordinance, it applies to new buildings that you want to put up, number one. And where you would get hooked on your house is if you made a substantial renovation and you wanted a permit. And under the ordinance, they can require you, if you put in a substantial renovation, to have a new appraisal made of the house as is. And then the cost of the renovation, if it's equal to 50% of the appraisal value, then you have to comply with all the requirements. So it would let you make minor improvements, and if you were going to build a new house, you'd have to, deal with this. But I think you're right, Howard, that if you've got your situation where you've got your mortgage separate for your residence from the rest of your property, you probably could get along without this. But the town council is going to be asked to make a yes or no adoption decision based on the realization that we've got a lot of people out here that may not be able to avoid it. And that's going to be a tough decision for the council, because they're going to have people like you that would not necessarily be adversely affected, but any new person that comes in and wants to build a residence is going to have a problem.
And we're not the only ones in this boat. It's also happening to Wellington. I mean, that's why everybody's getting together and they're, not paranoid over it, but they're
paranoid.
sorry. Because people who didn't have to get it before, I'd be in that boat. I don't have it, but I'm going to have to get it if I'm in a flood zone.
Katie?
Large parts of Wellington are in flood zones. Houses that I sell all the time are in flood zones. It's about $400 a year for flood insurance. You know that. I mean, you have it. It covers everything from if your house floods in a storm, if a pipe breaks in your attic, if your tub overflows. So it covers more than just water coming in your home. I understand people don't want the flood insurance, but it's not horrible to have flood insurance. And when I have placed flood insurance on my properties, I haven't needed an elevation certificate. The only time I've needed that is when I did new construction on property. So that was just a different scenario than yours.
Well, what happens, go ahead.
I also got flood insurance on my barn and on my home. So they did it was a flood insurance package. So if my barn floods, they will fix that, if that helps answer your question.
Here's the one thing I'd like to point out to you though, because that does sound good, but one of the things, and this information comes from Palm Beach County that they provided, Ken Todd provided in a, I think you all know Ken Todd, he provided this in a report to the Western Community Councils at our last meeting. Florida already writes 40% of all the flood claim policies in the country. And then Palm Beach County writes the most out of Florida, so you can imagine, we've got a lot of skin in the game here. And the issue with the National Flood Insurance Program is they passed what was called the Bigger Waters Act, which gave the flood insurance program a 5-year extension. But what has happened, I guess, over time is you've had so many floods and different things happen where people didn't have insurance, they were paying out, and they got in a hole. And supposedly, this is going to mean that owners of subsidized non-primary residence in special flood hazard areas will receive a 25% increase annually until the rates reflect a true risk. So not only are you going to be picking up flood insurance, but it looks like you could be getting socked 3 or 4 or 5 years in a row, and so because they're going to try to make that program solvent, and right now it isn't.
In non-residential, in the secondary, if it's not your primary residence, is what you're saying. So pay off your mortgage?
So, I mean, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff. It's pretty onerous. So, I guess tonight, in summary, and then I'll shut up. In summary, I think, I don't think you have to make a decision tonight. I mean, we could talk about this over several meetings if you want more time to look at the ordinances, but I think it probably, what would be good is if this committee gave council a recommendation, at least a future recommendation, either to do its own ordinance or adopt the counties, and we'll continue to work, and obviously we're gonna have to see, just where the county is on this, because I don't want the town being held hostage, by,
Just as an ongoing thing, since you're gonna be in the midst of it, and I'll certainly say this to Steve, can y'all give us, a monthly update as to what's going on with the review and what the prospects for dealing with this are?
I have a question, and so obviously, no one's I haven't heard anyone object to that, we just review this and it'll come up later after Mark attends these meetings and gives us feedback, okay? My question is, if you can make a recommendation to the town council, the town council can put an ordinance in place, but being that FEMA is a government program, what indicates that they will respect any ordinance we make?
It's their model.
FEMA's, pardon?
It's their model.
Right, but what I'm saying is if the town council chooses to not use that model, we're talking about making recommendations.
Well, I would probably say, my recommendation would be either follow that model or adopt the counties, because you kind of said it earlier. Otherwise, I think you're setting yourself up for a lot of unnecessary legal expense.
Right, that's my question. I mean, bottom line reality is you're dealing with the government, and we can dream, but
And the town's going to expend money now, because what I have to do is get my consultant on this. Hopefully, my consultants look at it and they say, this is not good. I mean, that's what a lot of the cities and their engineers are saying right now. And FEMA's here in a chorus of unhappiness from all the Palm Beach County communities, and I mean, they're being told some of the analysis that they've done is flawed. They're using wrong assumptions. Apparently, everyone along the C-51 canal got socked pretty badly, and we don't know, if the assumptions they're using there because these are, engineers and consultants out of Atlanta that are doing this.
Yeah, that's the same project that the district is undertaking this year. We're gonna be cleaning out the culverts, number one. And number two, we're resurveying the design elevations, because we had an update to a floodplain study done in the year 2000. And, our floodplain studies were measured against a 100-year flood. So if we can establish the design capacity of the canals by cleaning out the culverts under Okeechobee Boulevard and making sure that the base elevations of the canals equal the design elevations, we're going to be cleaning out on an ongoing basis all year. We're going to try and give that argument as part of the town's argument for Loxahatchee Road.
And I very much appreciate the district working with us, because even though the town is on the hook to do this as far as the ordinance and everything, I think the district and the town working together gives us a little more ammo, especially as it relates to this portion in terms of the firm maps.
okay, so it sounds, and again, what I said before, it seems like Mark and Jim, that we're looking for more input and feedback from you, and we're just gonna review this as Mark and Jim bring it back to us. There's really nothing to say tonight.
Yeah, I think probably, there's no decision tonight, but I think maybe what you might want to do is if you have the time, take a look at those ordinances, and if you see things that bother you, at least that gives you the basis to then formulate a future
Right, like how we did.
recommendation to the town council.
Okay, moving on to item 3, or excuse me, let's see, I was already.
Item 2, payment.
Yes, item 2, pain management clinic.
Yeah, let me just give you a quick update on this. We have the ordinance in there. What happened from my review of history is that the town adopted an ordinance, or at least a moratorium back in 2010-03. It was adopted on March 16, 2010. It declared a zoning in progress declaration of moratorium, which is not repealed as of today until new land use regulations were adopted by town council. Which generally, everything that I've learned and I'm aware of, usually a moratorium should have a date where it ends, and you just can't go ahead and adopt a moratorium and have it go on and on. Definitely. So the ordinance calls for town administration to examine and make recommendations to town council. Obviously, when this was first promulgated, it was under the old management company. I learned about it when I was preparing to do some remarks to the landowners association. And a couple of times it was brought up to council in the scope of ULDC reviews before council opted to take it to a committee as reviewers like yourselves. So, at that time, when the ordinance was adopted, the pain clinics and the fill mills and that whole issue was really a very hot and controversial issue. There were a lot of those places operating, a number of Florida young kids, and drugs, and there were a lot of problems with that. Dave Arenberg, who is our state attorney right now, is actually working with the Attorney General's office of the state of Florida, with Attorney General Bondi. This was one of his big initiatives when he was up there. So, the new management team took over October 1, 2011, and we've indicated to council a couple of times, what we want us to do with it. And haven't really gotten to that direction because it's now in your court. Do we need an ordinance? We probably need some regulations, I'm sure. So I guess what I'm indicating to you folks, all you have is an ordinance adopting the moratorium. You don't have any regulations in front to discuss. So I think what you might be doing is either giving us a direction or giving town council a direction what you think needs to happen. Now, I would think if we're directed to do something, we're going to have to do a lot of research on our own. Even though it might not be primary research, it might already be that research that's out there. Because my understanding is the problem has subsided a little bit, based upon actions that were taken previously. Talking to Lieutenant Combs, trying to work with him on this issue. So, it's really up to you to give a recommendation to town council as to what you think we ought to do with it and how we ought to approach it.
John?
I think that we certainly don't want to have competing regulations with nearby communities. And I know one of the big issues developed out of Wellington, and people went to jail there because they were running a chain of these things, Roxycontin and other things. So I think if Wellington and Royal Palm have already digested the issues and have regulations that they've formally adopted, maybe we can save ourselves some legal time and trouble by, basically looking at their regulations as a model.
That's a good point, and if you want, before making a determination, we have a number of meetings left. We can try to collect those and provide you with a copy by your next agenda, and then you can take a look at those. That gives you something to work with, at least in terms of, because it's not something we're going to jump on now. Obviously, we're not doing any work except for these special sessions. So,
Howard, and then I'll have something to
You
say.
mentioned in a previous meeting, Mark, that we cannot write in anything that would prohibit the activity completely. When we talked about pain clinics several meetings ago, we basically said we couldn't write an ordinance saying no pain clinics are allowed. You can't do that. That
no,
somehow
you have to regulate them.
you have to regulate them.
You can
Right?
regulate
You
them
can't
severely,
prohibit
but-
them. Okay, so needless to say, we have to write an ordinance. We can't have a moratorium last forever. So we might as well just take the bull by the horns, and as John said, look at what surrounding communities have and tailor it to our needs. I don't see we have any other choice.
Okay. My comment would be when we look at what you bring to us, I would ask us to focus on the response of the hospitals and real doctors, because pain management is a serious issue for people who don't abuse it. So we have to be careful not to destroy someone's life who's not a drug, standing out on the corner, able to physically stand outside the building, because they're obviously not in pain if they can stand outside waiting for this prescription.
I don't see us destroying anybody's life by not allowing pain clinics in Loxahatchee Groves. There's certainly enough access to legally.
Let me clarify what I'm saying. You have a medical building being built on it, so we do have to deal with the issue. What I'm saying is, I think when we look at it, we need to be respectful of, and not respectful, but mindful of real doctors trying to help people, and just keep that in mind. John?
Yeah, I think in the shopping center, one of our shopping centers that we usually go to, either the one at Jeff Santa Maria, you know, right across from Jeff Santa Maria, where Duffy's is. If I'm thinking right, I may be thinking that. The two shopping centers, I've seen a pain management clinic in one of those shopping centers. I hadn't paid that much attention to it, but I was surprised to see a pain management clinic. So either Royal Palm Beach, I think they must have some regulations, and, you know, we might want to see. I think the key thing is that a real doctor, you know, is full-time involved as opposed to, however, those people in Wellington got away with it by having a supervisory doctor and then a bunch of loosely run
Yeah,
dispensaries.
and I would think that the tell is, they don't have people standing outside the door in Wellington and Royal Palm Beach, like you're saying. Let's look at what they've done and then we'll talk about it.
You know, I can see, I know when Dave Ehrenberg did a presentation the same night with me and a couple others at the Landowners Association, I think he had some PowerPoints and different things, and maybe we could talk to Marge Herzog or somebody and see if they still have those in their possession. That might be good materials to get our hands on. I mean, he had a lot of statistics and you know, different facts and figures that might be you know, possible for our use. Marge would probably know for sure if she still has that stuff. I think he made it available to them. So
Okay. Ready to move on then?
you can if you are.
Moving on to item 3, ULDC Article 87.
My suggestion is that's the one we defer or table until next meeting and we go to number 4, if that's okay.
Any objections? And item 3, ULDC Article 87 on page 77.
Let me just say before if you decide to defer it, let me just give you a quick, one of the reasons why that was identified and is before you. We had a couple issues that came up, and when we were looking at this, we found that there were some typographical, but there were also some problems with the ordinance and the way it was constructed. There was a wrong reference to, I think something was supposed to be feet, it was inches, and there were a couple of paragraphs that didn't make sense, so it really needs to be looked at even just from a housekeeping point of view as well as substance.
One of the definition statutes needs to be updated.
Yes.
Okay, and then just when you bring it back too, because I'm curious, I saw that you have your agriculture bona fide only, and my question when we do come back to it, if we choose to table it, is to have a discussion on ag in general, and
Right.
bona fide ag, we have.
Well, I can tell you this, and Jim jumped in if you want to. I know Jim did some research, and so did Braden, actually, both of them did. I believe the town had actually convened a committee to work on this, because this is very much similar to the county's ordinance, but the town actually had a committee and kind of tried to customize it to the town.
Where is this committee?
Well, that was, what, years ago? Remember the dates and names?
Okay, you're talking way past.
Oh, yeah.
ULDC type stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
just this stuff. It was a committee for, you know, tree preservation, and
It was an environmental committee.
that's it. Environmental committee. You didn't find anything much different from.
No, it was, they pretty much ended up adopting the similar ordinance and codes that the ERM has. So, I mean, this is, if you find the ERM documents, they're pretty much mirror almost what these are.
ERM,
Mm-hmm.
that's a state of Florida?
That's
or-
counties.
Yes.
That's the counties?
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Okay,
this,
so- John, so we can take some time to do some more research on this topic ourselves, John, go ahead.
yeah, just one background thought. When I read through it, you know, it looked like what I remember the environmental committee doing. The one thing that I thought maybe was left out of it was that there was any clearing that a drainage requirement also be put in, you know, not just,
Say that again?
they're talking about clearing property, and they said if you were clearing it for an agriculture purpose, you know, you might have to adopt a covenant on your deed to mitigate if you gave up the agriculture. But when they were talking about requirements on clearing the property, the one thing they left out was dealing with drainage. And I would think that, you know, anybody that is doing any substantial amount of clearing ought to have as part of these requirements that there be a ditch that feeds into eventually one of the canals so that we don't just have swamps. I don't know if that fits under this or under, building, but, I've known people that just clear property and they don't pay any attention to drainage at the same time they clear it.
My advice to you would be very similar to the other items. I don't think it's incumbent upon you to try to rewrite it and come up with, or to even determine if it's sufficient, but I think you want to look at it and you want to say, and you want to give council advice, what should we do with it? Does it need another look? I mean, even though they've had a committee, and I'm not trying to do double work and triple work and beat something to death, obviously there might be some issues, and I think that's really the key recommendation you're making to council. If you think it needs, more work, more scrutiny, that's what you're probably want to try.
Drainage was the only thing that jumped out.
I think that issue is covered in the county's flood ordinance.
The new one?
Yes.
In the county's ordinance?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I'm also aware, I guess there's some new things that you can go to the state and ask for exemption on certain things now too, so we just need to get more information on what's out there and go through the flood ordinance obviously now too.
Yeah.
All right, does anyone object to pushing this to another thing? Because we obviously have to get some reading in, and again, my question would be how agriculture in general is affected by this, and being aware of any, I would like to know of any exemptions the state permits for this sort of area. Okay, that takes us to item 4, discussion of vermiculture and other agricultural issues. Jim, would you like to start this discussion?
I brought this up last month for two reasons. Number one, because as what Mark indicated earlier, we're getting, we have a form called the zoning confirmation request form. If somebody has a particular use that is not specifically identified or defined in our code, they can make a request of staff to give them a determination as to whether or not it's a permitted use, or would it require a special exception, or is it conditional use. Well, we've been getting some very unusual, difficult uses to interpret in terms of our code, all of which are related to agriculture uses to some extent. And that sort of gets us back to two issues. Some of the uses that are requesting whether or not they can occur in the town have potentially noxious impacts on the town's residents. And that being the case, should we be looking at procedures to take a preliminary look at these uses prior to them being built, so that we have the ability to try to address those issues and mitigate them to the extent that we can before they become a problem. And then that gets into the issue of bona fide agriculture. Do we have the ability to impose any land development regulations or any approvals on bona fide agricultural uses? Now, in our code in the AR district, we have under permitted uses, we have agriculture and we have bona fide agriculture, two distinctive uses. And that on that basis, I called the property appraiser and said, okay, when does the use become bona fide ag? And because under the previous administration, the property appraiser would take a business plan of a proposed use and make the determination that that use was in fact bona fide ag. Under the new administration, based on the conversation I had with the appraiser, he said that they will no longer do that. And that the use doesn't become bona fide ag until it is actually up and running and it has business receipts and tax returns, things of this nature. So that leads me to believe that there is a gap between when an intended bona fide agricultural use gets started and when in fact it becomes bona fide. So on that basis, does that give us the ability to take a look at these proposed uses at a time when they are just agriculture and before they become bona fide agriculture? Do we have the ability to set up some sort of a process where we can review a proposed bona fide agricultural use so that we have the ability to address some of the potential issues that might arise as a result of the application? And I specifically mentioned this last month because of one particular request that we just recently had. Was that an owner of a chain of restaurants here in Palm Beach County has identified a property out here. He wants to bring the kitchen wastes and the wastes from the meals out here, and he wants to start a worm farm where he feeds the kitchen wastes to the worms. The worm castings, which is the worm's residual, is going to then be used as a soil amendment. In addition to that, he wants to bring out his used glass, grind up the glass and create sand, and mix the sand with the worm castings to create this soil amendment. Now, if a vermiculture operation is not run properly, it can be very noxious in terms of odor, in terms of pests and vermin that are drawn to the site, and also there's some potential issues, I think, with the grinding of the glass. Is that going to be an operation that takes place on the site, or is it going to be accomplished somewhere else and he imports the sand? And there's probably some other environmental issues involved in this as well. So I'm using that example as a basis to get an opinion from the committee here as to whether or not you feel that we should be looking at some of these uses prior to them being implemented and before they become bona fide ag. Now, we did get an opinion from the County Extension Service that vermiculture is bona fide ag when it's up and running. So that complicates the issue further because this
Or uncomplicates it, depends how you look at it.
yeah. Well, it complicates it further because at some point it probably will become bona fide ag, but it's not bona fide ag until the property appraiser determines that it is. This gap might give us the opportunity to make sure that issues such as rodent vermin control and odor is taken care of by management plans prior to the operation being built. And just wanted to see how the committee feels about that.
All right, we'll start with Howard, then John, and then Katie, and
Yeah,
I'm gonna listen first.
I have a handout that I prepared. First of all, I'd like to say that I believe your reasoning is flawed, that the state is the ultimate determinator of what is bona fide ag. Bona fide, you'll have a hard time finding a definition of that in the state statutes, and the reason is because no definition is necessary. Bona fide means with real intent, okay? It doesn't mean anything else. It's an adjective that goes in front of agriculture. So if you have corn in your backyard that you're growing for your family to eat, it's agriculture. But if you're growing corn to sell as a business, it's bona fide ag. Now, the Palm Beach County Properties Appraiser's Office has been given the task of determining when you're bona fide, but if they unilaterally choose not to extend it to a particular form of agriculture, that doesn't mean that you're not bona fide. However, that's not the discussion I want to get into. I believe we need to seriously look at the fact whether or not this committee can even touch anything that's related to agriculture. That doesn't mean that there's not ways to make ordinances and everything else, and there should be another committee or what have you. But we are a Unified Land Development Code committee. Now, the handout I gave you, the first page is Attorney Cirillo's statement that the town has developed these regulations pursuant to Chapter 163 Florida statutes. Now, you look at Section 163 Florida statutes, and it defines, it says development has the same meaning as in 380.04. Now, the next page is the excerpt from that reference, where if you look at the highlighted area, it says the following operations or uses shall not be taken for the purpose of this chapter to involve development as defined in this section. And then you go to the next one, it says the use of any land for the purpose of growing plants, crops, trees, and other agricultural or forestry products, raising livestock, or for other agricultural purposes. So, according to this, we can't address anything in the Unified Land Development Code. That's the operative word. We can't address anything that has to do with agriculture within this code. It's not permissible according to state statute. So if we're going to proceed, then we need some kind of opinion, because to me, when you read all these things, it clearly states that what we're doing, we're not supposed to be doing. We're not supposed to have anything in relation to agriculture. Now, I've suggested 3 different questions. It could be sent, the last page, which could be sent to the Attorney General for clarification with issues that are constantly being raised in this town. But I highly doubt, when I read all of these things, that we should be putting anything about regulating agriculture in our land development code, since Florida statute specifically says it's not to be taken as land development.
The only thing I have on the face, though, I caution you to be careful there, because I believe 380 is the statute that governs developments of regional impact. And if that's the definition
Say
we're
that
taking,
again?
it's Chapter 380, which Howard doesn't indicate there, but I'm pretty sure I'm correct. 380 is the statute that deals with developments of regional impact. And that may be why they're using that definition, because it defines farming for the purposes of determining if you have a development of regional impact.
What did you say?
Regional impact.
Developments of regional impact. They're called DRIs in the
Right,
state.
what is that?
They're addressed by the regional planning councils. You don't go through city, I mean, it may be in a certain city, but the regional planning councils have jurisdiction over them to some extent, because they're usually developments that meet some kind of threshold that have been identified in the state. It could be like, depending upon the size of the county, it could be 2,000 units, it could be 3,000 units, depending upon how populous the county is. It's obviously, so when they say regional impact, it's somebody doing a development it's going to be large, and it's going to have impacts to the general area. I'm only pointing that out because when you start talking about what definitions you're using and everything, you got to look at why they're pulling the definition out from that particular statute.
Aren't we a large development now?
Oh, no.
No.
This is stuff like regional malls and things like that. They, you know, airports, they would.
You missed the sarcasm,
I know.
Mark.
So
I know.
380.04 is only for regional development.
I don't know. I'm saying, that is the statute that's coming from, they're referring to.
Because, yeah, and I guess we need to review that.
Yeah, we have to look at that.
It's because it refers to state land planning agencies, which, you know, and they give a definition of development, which again excludes agriculture, so we do need to look at that. But, okay, hold on, Howard, are you done?
Yes.
Okay, John and then Katie?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, when we sat down in our first meeting, I think Mike Cirillo gave us good advice at that meeting, which was, let's stay out of trying to regulate agriculture because state statutes are going to determine, and we don't want to start getting into litigation being at variance with the mix of the state statutes that are involved. Now, with respect to this permaculture thing, I've got a thought. Most of the state statutes allow local communities to regulate things like sanitation for the health and welfare of the residents. You know, I wouldn't want to try and say that we should prohibit permaculture because I don't think if the county extension agent says it's agriculture, I don't think we could legally do that. But one thing I think we could do to protect the town and the residents is that we could require a sanitation bond, which, and an agreement with the parties that are developing this that says in the event that they violate sanitation requirements and are creating a noxious situation that is a problem with the health and welfare of the community, they agree beforehand that number one, we can shut them down and call their bond to clean the damn thing up. And, you know, I think as long as we keep any bond and any requirement like that tied to health and welfare of the community, you know, maybe we could protect ourselves without getting into a controversy over what is and what is not agriculture.
All right, Katie is back, and then Howard.
I'm just thinking, wouldn't the health department regulate how they dispose of their waste, number one? And then, number two, I know kids have done projects raising worms, and they don't feed them rotten food. They do things like manure and stuff like that, so I don't know anything about worm farming. I just would
They use
think.
in composting and food, natural food, that they do it different ways.
Right, but in a compost pile, you don't usually put meat, right? I mean,
Right now, there's no meat.
so maybe if we regulated that he used compost, not, you know, pork off of somebody's plate. I mean, there's gotta
Well,
be a
and
way
yeah, be
to.
careful, because it's ag.
Right, but it's also, wouldn't that be a health department issue? Because health department does regulate how restaurants get
Solid
rid of
waste
their
authority,
waste.
yeah, that's right, we already bounced this off the solid waste authority. If they're not charging a fee to bring it on site, the solid waste authority doesn't regulate it, and they would look at the end product as a recovered resource.
But not so much solid waste authority, but health department. The health department, don't they look at where?
Sanitation, health is what you're talking about.
Right, I'm talking about health, not,
Yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm not sure about that. That's something that we sort of, now those are the kind of things that we would like the ability to check into when a proposal comes into town. What issues like that are issues that we need to resolve ahead of time. And that's, if we're saying totally hands off on ag, come on in and do whatever you want, then we wouldn't have the opportunity to even look at those issues. And that's what I'm saying, are we interested in setting up some kind of a system where we look at that stuff? Or do we just say, come on in and do what you want?
Okay, Beth, and then Howard, and then John, and then I'll wrap it up.
I kind of agree with Ryan, Tom Ryan about what he was saying with the bond and all that, but the issue is then, isn't there already some laws in effect if somebody is contaminating something, I mean, it can be fertilizer or herbicides or whatever. I mean, those already exist. To burden somebody specifically on, because they brought in wilted lettuce and tomatoes, I think it is too much. Now, here's the other thing of something that is typical, especially in this area, of processed food products that are used as a food source, in cattle specifically, is citrus pulp, or watermelons, or tomatoes, or any of these other vegetables that come from these packaging places. You can show up, they'll load you up, you come dump it out there for your cows to eat. Guess what, guys, there's nothing you can do about it. Because that is a foodstuff, wasted food for human consumption that can be used for animal consumption. It's a real slippery slope, and we're only focusing on one certain situation that deals with worms in this guy's restaurant waste products. If he does only bring fruits and vegetables and that kind of stuff, and he does do it right, no harm, no foul, can we really regulate an agricultural entity? And from what I understand, no, we can't. Because it's already stated that we can do these agricultural endeavors. I mean, if this guy just did it, can the town say, no, you can't do that? It would be like if somebody fenced off their property and put cows on there. Whether it's zoned ag or not, you can't tell him he can't do that.
Yeah, well, my basic question is, and I don't have the answer to it, is that, is there a difference between ag and bona fide ag, and does the regulation, the hands-off start when something becomes bona fide ag?
I would think that it's hands-off when you do an agricultural endeavor, period. Even if it is bona fide ag, because from what I understand, we've gone round and round on this. Bona fide ag is the land. He gets a bona fide ag designation, not the endeavor that is being done on that land. Am I correct in that assumption?
Well, it's a business. Bona fide ag is a business.
Yeah, I think you're being a little too,
Don't want to separate.
you're taking a more simplistic view of it, because some of the things that we've come in where they've asked us, and they're asking us for the interpretation, because they want to know
Well, Mark,
how we're going to look at them.
Let me give you an let me simplify this. Behind me is a dressage business. That's a bona fide ag business, correct?
Yes.
I'm in an agricultural area. I have no business right now. What is my land zoned?
R.O. 5.
Here we are.
I'm ag, right? Okay, so there's the perfect example. We have two properties right next to each other. One is a bona fide ag business. I'm just ag with nothing on it right now. Those V's I keep talking about might show up.
Probably classified residential.
Yeah.
Right now I'm
Ag
residential,
property.
but I'm ag res. Okay, so
But-
technically I'm ag, and if I want to do something on that that's ag, you're trying to say you could stop me because I'm not bona fide ag.
No,
No, I
I'm not
think-
trying to say that. I mean,
Regulate you.
I'm trying to find out what the feeling of the committee is in terms of, is this something that we should pursue, where we set up some kind of a system where we look at these businesses?
Right, I've just given you a
Activities
real
before
town
they start.
example of
Well,
two
in
properties.
my personal opinion, no, because from what I understand, we have this year time period to go, oh, wait a second. You just brought in 40 sows in farrowing crates, and it's gonna stink next to my property. I'm gonna go, no, hold on, you're not gonna do this. And we have a right am I correct in that assumption? And you can stop that?
Well, what if you tell me you're doing ag because you think you're doing ag, but you're really doing solid waste recovery?
Well, then you're not doing ag.
Well, who's going to make that determination? That's what we're saying.
Well, I guess if they come in, well, here's the thing, if somebody comes in and says, this is what I wanna do, is it ag? Can we not just say yes or no? And if we don't know them, can we not ask, like you did, the extension service? And if the extension service says, yes, it's ag, then it's ag, it's over.
Yeah, and a lot of these operations,
That's all I'm saying.
a lot of these ag-type businesses have several components to what they want to do. Part of it might be we had one the other day where a guy wants to bring in vegetative waste from off-site, and he wants to bring in manure and barn wastes, process that, use some of it on his property, and then sell the rest of it. So,
I don't get, is that ag?
Sounds like odors.
some of it is, some of it isn't, you know, and so.
Well, like for this example with the worms, I would say the glass crushing is not ag.
Well, actually, that turns.
And you can
to
tell,
some-
look, I mean, if you want to feed your worms, you can feed your worms, but you can't crush your glass.
We suspect that people are being directed to come.
Yeah.
And that's a concern because, you know, I don't think it's fair that the town should automatically be the dumping ground, but for anybody who has a use that's questionable, okay, let's bring it to Lock, Statute, Gross. I mean, that's why we're trying to be careful, making sure that, yeah, these things are ag. If they're ag, sure, they should be able to go do whatever they want. I mean, as long as they fall within those requirements. But if you start to try to put ag on something that's not ag, that's not fair to the residents of the town.
Jim, when you discussed this with the ag department, did you mention the glass part? Because it's grounded in silica becomes sand, did they refer to the glass as ag also? Or did you not get that in depth?
No, she gave me an interpretation that vermiculture was.
Right, so you just spoke about the vermin, so Beck has a good point, we're separating the
Yeah.
issues.
Yeah, that's right. I talked to Solid Waste Authority about the glass aspect of it. And they said that if no fees, if there's no fees, they don't charge. And let me see, what was the other part of it? Oh, that's right. As long as they're creating a recycled resource, they wouldn't regulate it on that end either. But now the health department, I didn't talk to them as to whether or not they would.
But going back on regulating ag or not, I feel that if it's ag, it's ag.
But even if you're.
If they're coming in with glass, then okay, look guys, we found out that vermiculture is ag, you can have raise your worms, rock and roll, go on. Now the glass part of it, sorry, we don't allow recycling in lots of country growth. I'm just using that.
Here's
as-
your
Sure,
container.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's
Here's
like-
your commercial container, pay your fee.
or unless it wants to be brought up to the town and they want to vote on it and say yes and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
but
And part of the reason that I bring this up is that we have, I think somewhere between 1,200 and 1,500 parcels of land in Loxahatchee Groves that are much smaller than 5 acres and are essentially homesteads for, the resident has a house. So some of the impacts that might not necessarily be an issue in an entirely agricultural area are an issue here. And I think we also need to understand that some of these unusual businesses are going to be located right next to some fairly small lots with homes on them. And
They chose to live in an agricultural community, and their real estate agent or the person they bought it from privately should have told them it was ag. Real estate agents have to give you a paper sign saying, you know you're buying an agricultural
that may
community.
be the case, but that's not going to stop them from coming into the staff.
And you say,
and
thank
complaining.
you, but no thank you, this is agricultural community. It's clear and cut and dry. I don't know why the people who buy here who aren't ag are surprised where they bought. I mean, and all the staff has to do is put a big sign on the door saying agricultural community.
But you still have sanitation and businesses. And
But let's hold up for a minute. Mark has to take off, so let's,
Yeah, but you were on a good point there, I was trying to hear.
but you just, whenever you have to go, Mark, you know you're
You
leaving.
can listen to the audio.
All right, let's get back to, it's Howard and then Katie, are you done? Or are you still?
No, I have
Howard?
one more thing to say. but
Okay, let's
but
go with Katie first, please, then Howard, then John.
Even if you're bona fide ad, you still have to abide by the health department and the EPA. That's it. I mean, farm guy has to abide by their rules, so.
Howard?
Okay. The health department is a tiger with no teeth. I've dealt with them before. There are things that I know have gone on in my industry where any health department that was worth its salt would have closed the farm down until they proved to be disease-free. Whereas these bozos in Palm Beach County come look on your property and say, well, I guess all the birds look healthy, and leave. okay? So forget about the health department. If you can prove you got a bunch of people coming down with a major illness, yeah, you'll get them to move. But otherwise, don't plan on them helping you out. Having said that, and I'm sure there's the same with the EPA, they have standards they have to go by, and you have to prove, okay? There was a threat at one point in time that the EPA was going to come down on us if we didn't pave the roads with ozone because of the dust. And I called the EPA and I spoke to them extensively. And they basically said in order for them to force a municipality or somebody to do something, they have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on testing equipment and leave it out there for X amount of time, monitor it, fix it, maintain it, in order to force a municipality or private property to do a specific thing. So you can forget the EPA. I don't think it's an issue whether, forget the argument whether it's bona fide ag or regular ag, do we have this window or not. I sincerely believe that all the things that you sensibly feel need to be done, and we would all feel need to be done, can be done without even touching agriculture. Because there still is, you got 12 months to declare something a nuisance, okay? You got noxious odors, you got all of this kind of stuff. What I would like to see is the town be able to pursue something like that, rather than have it dependent on the neighbors filing complaints. When you are talking about noxious odors or manufacturing or you know, at what point does something become a waste recycling facility, okay? Well, we all know the answer to that. If what you are doing and it fills the needs of your own industry on your property, then that's fine. As soon as you're making more to sell, that's different. I believe there's already something in our ULDC about making potting soil, for nurseries making potting soil. Before they weren't allowed to do it at all, and then I believe Bill Lauda was an advocate of putting something in there to allow nurseries to mix their own potting soil for their own use, not to be sold elsewhere. Well, something like that could be made to apply. And if all of a sudden this guy is bringing in truckloads of glass and truckloads of garbage, then why can't the town go in there, code enforcement go in there and say, show me how you're using all this for your operation? Nobody said, they said you can't take the right to farm, to agriculture, away from somebody. No one ever said the town couldn't monitor what was going on in situations like that, where you don't want something to turn from I'm making my own worm bedding to I'm actually looking for a way to secretly have a recycling plant here for waste matter. And so the town could certainly monitor something like that if it ever came into question. Now, if the guy is doing what he's doing and nothing smells and there's no horrible noises and no one's complaining, who cares? Even though it sounds horrendous. I wouldn't want to live next door to it, but if I didn't know I was living next door to it, big deal. So that's where I'm coming from on this, that it can be, you can keep tabs on it, you can keep a thumb on it without touching agriculture. And you just got to let these people know when they come in, hey, it's agriculture, we're not going to touch it. However, we will have monitoring, we will be monitoring you closely to make sure this doesn't turn into a waste recycling situation and you're only bringing as much stuff in there that you can use on your property, in your operation, okay? Hey, if you got 10 vats of worms, you certainly can't need 50 tons of glass. So I believe it can be and should be handled in that way.
Yeah. Well, my response to that is that do we wait until it becomes an issue, or do we require that use to come to the town and explain up front what they want to do, and give the town a chance to identify items that very likely could become issues, and we would like to see you do this up front so it doesn't become an issue.
I have no issue with that, as long as it's not done within the frame of regulating agriculture. Any waste recycling for any purpose whatsoever, you must file a plan with the town.
Okay, John and then Beck.
Yeah, I think a couple of good points have come out here, because what you were describing to me really was this turning into a landfill with some recycling. Howard is right, that under Right to Farm, you've got a year to really see if this operation is a nuisance. And you do have state statutes that basically say that if you're gonna compost or you're gonna do this kind of recycling, it's not for sale, because they can't regulate the compost, they can't regulate the chemical composition of it. You can use it for your own operation on site. So if this guy had a 2 or 3 acre parcel and he was trying to develop a worm farm, he's gonna have some logical relation between the amount he's composting and the amount he can reasonably use. And I'm not a livestock farmer, but I know what Beck is saying about people going to orange processing facilities and getting whatever they haven't squeezed out and bringing it back for the cows. But usually they do that in a reasonable time relationship when the cows are going to eat it, and before it just becomes a pile of smelly garbage.
Right, yes.
So I think if you made it clear to these people, but I would ask for a cleanup bond and let them know that if they start letting their operation get out of control, we're gonna try and bring it back into balance. And maybe legally you can do something that within that first year, you may be able to get something that tolls that time if they're doing a risky activity, too much landfills type stuff, and they wanted to just behave themselves for a year and then go hog wild, it could become a legal issue. So maybe get an agreement with them that, the first year, they're going to be closely monitored, and they're going to sign 2 agreements. One is a cleanup bond, and the other is an agreement to balance the amount of waste that they're processing to what they're exclusively using for their farming operation. And that they're doing it in a proportion that doesn't lead to the pests or the smells or the other things that are nuisances. And that that is a continuing requirement. In other words, Right to Farm, has a 1-year cutoff or something.
Only if you don't increase intensity.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is, we make a separate agreement with them and say, look, we're not going to deny you Right to Farm, but you're running a operation that can get out of balance. So we want an agreement with you that 1-year nuisance exposure is a old exposure. In other words, it's continuous exposure.
No, what I'm saying is that 1-year nuisance exposure disappears if you increase intensity, and you're talking about
No, I know what you're
intensity.
saying. No, I'm talking about, well, yeah.
So the clock starts all over again,
Well, no,
as
but
soon as you
here's-
increase intensity.
But here's the thing, I think you have to make it clear to them, and you're right there, that if they increase the amount after the first year and they didn't increase the volume of worm production, then it, gets out of balance. Or if they increase the volume of worm production, it's tolled automatically. But that's, I think those kind of nuances are going to have to be made clear to them, because it sounds to me like people bringing garbage in and doing what they're talking about doing could get out of hand.
Exactly. And like I said, we've had it, and Braden can back me up on this. We get unusual requests, not quite this unusual, but unusual requests almost daily.
Like, can you give us a couple of examples?
Well, the other one was the guy that wanted to bring in the vegetative waste, and he also wanted to bring in manure, and combine the two, create a soil amendment, and then sell it.
when he wanted to clean the barn waste, resell the clean shavings at a lower cost. Using, yeah. But I mean, he wanted to use these, big dryer drums and chemicals,
Well,
these processes we've never even had to deal with before.
Well, here's the question on all that. Does that fit agriculture? I mean, if we were to call whoever and say, okay, guys, this is what these guys want to do, is this agriculture?
Well,
That's the biggest question, really and truly. I mean, this guy with his foreman, I totally see the conundrum in all that, because I think if somebody came in and says, hey, I'm gonna put up a horse farm, you guys can, that's agriculture, it's pretty black and white. Is that right? And these weird things like this, I think it has to be on a case per case, but I mean, this guy wanted to bring horse manure and vegetative waste and all that. I don't know if that fits within agriculture, because it just sounds like a process of some sort. They're not coming in and growing, or I don't know if it fits in the right farm. I have no idea. There has to, I would hope there'd be some sort of,
That,
Something
the
somewhere.
agency you went to before would be the
the
guy.
extension people, I would guess.
That's right.
he had an interesting response.
I can't remember what she said.
Well,
Get it in writing.
I know, well, it is in
We
writing.
did. We did.
Her response, her first, she had 3 replies to that business, but her first one was something along the lines of processing and selling, farm, any sort of farm,
Waste.
not waste, but product even.
Like the earth-
This
I
does
had
not
a question about
necessarily mean it's bona fide agriculture.
It is?
So it is not.
It is not.
It is not necessarily.
Okay.
So maybe that's one of those things, who would be the legislative body that would be, need to be addressed to?
Well, the way that we've been doing it is that we have this zoning confirmation request form. We do research and we give them a staff opinion. And in the staff opinion, we say, if you don't agree with this opinion, you have the ability to take it to the council and see if the council agrees with your opinion or staff's opinion. Now, that hasn't happened yet, but we have one where it could.
Well, I just, those certain scenarios are, I think, again, I think they should be addressed, because the first question is it ag? And if the question is, we have no idea, there are plenty of state tools that are free of charge. It's a phone call to find out is it or isn't.
Yeah.
Now, the county extension agent is not necessarily a governing body,
And that would support, what he said would be provide
but it
you
would
the
give you an
support to make
opportunity to
your
look at
decision.
something.
Yeah, but the county extension agent is one of the few places we can go where they will give us an opinion as to whether or not something is bona fide.
Right.
Most other agencies say, well, as soon as the property appraiser says it is, we're not gonna make that opinion. The extension agent will. And that's the only one that we found
Right.
so
John?
far.
Yeah, I know at one point, from a nursery standpoint, because we don't do it, because it's too big an operation for us, but I know other nurseries that do compost, but they can't sell the composting commercially.
Not,
They
well, can
use
they
it-
sell it wholesale?
No.
They
no,
can't
they
wholesale
can't.
it, not
No,
like
and
in
the whole
France?
reason is that the Department of, well, I'm not sure which department it is, whether it's Department of Ag or one of the other ones, but they regard the commercial sale of compost as fertilizer. And because compost can't have a stable, regulatable chemical composition, and if you were perfectly operating a composting facility and you got it down to where it had decayed to the point that there was absolutely no chemical composition involved, it was just totally neutral, that might be a different thing. But the state, as I understand it, looks at compost as something that you can use in your operation, but you can't commercially sell it.
Can you give it away for free?
I don't think you can even do that. I'm not sure whether you can. but it. as long-
SWA,
Pardon?
Solid Waste Authority.
Yeah, as long as you use it, you can do it. And I know some really big nurseries that do that. But once you're starting to mix urine-soaked shavings and, manure and, other vegetation products, you have to do it in a balanced way that you're using it yourself. And I know that a lot of nurseries have not looked at this as an easy thing to do, because if they don't let it decompose to an almost neutral state, they can get fungus and other problems. So it almost self-regulates itself if the composting operation has to use it in their operation and bear the consequences of it, and they're not commercially distributing this to where whatever the problems might be in this stuff, would damage.
Well, Jim, that's a good point. What do these people say they're going to do? Is this compost just they're buying land and they're building up their land? Are they planting plants? What is the purpose of you can compost, that's an agricultural activity, but what will they be doing with the compost?
Well, the one we're talking, specifically talking about is a large property that has an existing farm on it. And they're going to be using some of the residual on the farm, but they want to have the operation big enough so that they can sell some of it also.
They're not allowed to do that. That's not agriculture.
So, again, see, you kind of like in the discussion.
Well, that's what we told them. That's what our opinion was. But,
Self-regulated amounts.
yeah.
They can do so to the extent has been discussed tonight. We're not touching ag, we're not regulating it, that you've given them the outline of what they can do that fits within agriculture.
Right. Yeah, well, that's what we did. The agricultural extension agent did say, correct me if I'm wrong, Brayden, that they can bring it in, process it, use it on site, that's fine, for their own agricultural business. But once they start selling it off-site, even though it's the same product, it becomes a commercial business and not ag. And that's, so, and that's probably good. That's an example, I guess, of why I'm bringing this whole thing up now. That we need to be able to look at these proposals ahead of time.
Right, and you had your question, and part of your bigger question, and what was a concern to me and probably others here, it seemed when you were asking the question, and I think Howard addressed it beautifully, and everyone else has also, we're very concerned, we want to be hands-off ag because guidelines already exist, they're in place, and it could also have financial repercussions on the town if if things aren't handled properly when these rules already exist. It sounded like if I must have said something.
No, he said something.
Okay. You've got ag. And as long as you go with what the extension agents are telling you and fit within the ag guidelines, you're safe. It's not like, your question also had two parts to it. It was like, well, if they don't come in with their bona fide ag business, because that was the other half of your question last time. Usually you come in with an existing business, boom, you're set. Right now, there's some question as to that's valid or not. And I think that's the second part of the thing we need to look at. And I think we discussed it, is that if somebody comes in and they want to do an ag business, we're saying they're fine, right? Is that what I'm hearing? We're saying they're okay as long as.
At their risk.
Right.
Like Howard said, you've got a year that they can be.
And it rolls over.
And it'll roll over if they want to change the operation, but the other self-regulating thing is, if they do these oddball ancillary activities, they can only do it to the extent they use it on their property for their ag operation.
Right, and the perfect example, I'm sure everyone's aware of it, I don't know if Katie's aware of it, I live across from the banana farm, and it wasn't, they kept bringing in manure, 11 o'clock at night, and I had to call the sheriff and prove that these people were not following first the town tried to regulate this, and the sheriff finally documented, one, that the drivers were coming in outside of hours, so we got them that way. And I understand it's an agricultural operation, but they were not operating, it was simply a dump site. But now he's planting more banana plants, and he can bring in his manure because it's fertilizer for his use. So I'm not going to object to that, but I did object when it was just a dump site for Wellington.
Yeah.
About Howard yet?
Okay, I got several things to say. Okay, first of all, Jim, you gotta be careful of your words. You misspoke the last thing you said. You said it becomes commercial, not agriculture. No, it becomes manufacturing, not agriculture. Because agriculture can be commercial, and it's perfectly acceptable, and that's a difference between. So that plant, that vermiculture thing, when he starts manufacturing, producing so much that he's selling it, then it becomes a manufacturing plant, not that it becomes commercial, but it becomes manufacturing.
Okay, yeah, I use commercial because that was the term.
I know, I'm just.
But I understand what you're saying.
It's just like you talked to us about definitions, you're getting the western edge.
Now, the other thing that is important to say, and this coincides with what we're talking about now with keeping tabs on this, okay? I went and spoke with a banana guy privately after.
Which one? There's so many.
The one that got the town council to agree that he's allowed to dump 10 times more than
Oh,
what they
Don
were.
Ramon.
Okay, and I talked to them. I tried to grow bananas, okay? It's really hard to grow bananas commercially in Loxahatchee groves. There's all kinds of disease problems. And I got him aside and I talked to him and I said, come on, tell me, what's the story with this business? Are you really? And he admitted to me all these major problems with production. Yeah, the banana trees look gorgeous. They grow like bananas, okay? But you wind up getting very little fruit out of them. And of course, the parent plant dies off as soon as it throws the head of fruit. And then you get all these pups come up. So you can look at a banana plantation as far as the eye can see. And it looks gorgeous, but that doesn't mean they're really producing any bananas.
Which I made that point to the
Okay,
town council.
so I think in situations like this, the tax appraiser's office, the county, the town really has a right to say, show us, and you've been doing this for 5 years now, you've been doing this for 10 years now, we've given you free rein to dump all the manure you want because you've got this production going on. You know, please show us the first page of your income tax and let us see, are you making any money selling this fruit? Because if you're not, then it really is just a manure dumping site.
Bingo. Beck?
You're wrong.
Okay?
You can't tell somebody because they're crappy managers that they can't do an agricultural deal. Period.
But at some point in time,
No, you gotta leave that to the IRS to where, are they, in 7 years. And that's where you do the Schedule F and you can write all this stuff off, and if you don't get it within 7 years, see, dude, you can't do this anymore.
You started a new
But you
LLC?
can't tell somebody you can't do an ag deal because you're really crappy at doing it.
But they'll just start a new LLC on the same property.
That's fine, but you can't tell them they can't do it because they're bad.
That's how it works, right? That's what,
Well, it's like the old story. You know how you make a small fortune with horses? You start with a large one.
okay, so.
and the reason you can't sell the compost you make is because the state of Florida requires you to put on the bag how much phosphorus, how much this, how much that, so you know what plants to use on it, so you don't burn your plants.
Because you can also be sued over that.
Okay, so that's why it's prohibited.
Okay. So who would like to summarize this discussion? What have we said? What have you heard, John, and then Jim, you tell us what you've heard.
I think that a combination of the discussions as I've understood it is that looking at right to farm, we need to make sure that when these people come in with these plans, they understand, okay, you got a plan, you don't have an established operation with a history, you're going to be closely monitored. The first year, you run the risk of nuisance issues that may not be tolerable. If you behave yourself in the first year and then you try and increase the scale of your operation, the nuisance exposure is told, and I wouldn't hesitate to have some sort of a written agreement, almost like what Virginia was talking about, when somebody moves into an ag area, they have to certify that they're moving next to an ag area. And these guys have a written agreement that they understand they're gonna be closely monitored for nuisances. And to the extent that after the first year, if they increase the scale of their operation, that nuisance monitoring is gonna continue. And I would think, if there's a real risk of like an operation like this permaculture guy was talking about, that we might ask Mike Cirillo if we could have them post a cleanup bond. Because if they buy some property at very low prices, they may look at the cost of cleaning up their operation as more than the value of the property. And it would be a real hassle to get them to pay the money to clean it up if they make a mess out of it. But if we've got a bond that could be called based on, say, the magistrate confirming a health and safety issue on the property, that the combination of those disclosures might very well control the risks that the town is exposed to. And like Mark was saying, it sounds like a lot of these oddball ventures are going through discussions with the county or with the extension service or their attorneys, and they're getting somehow directed to Loxahatchee Groves.
I think that's true.
Under the glades.
Convinced that that's true.
We do have a public comment. Todd?
Tom McClendon.
Address?
3481 D Road, Loxahatchee. In the beginning of this conversation, John had made a comment about the first meeting that Mike Cirillo was here, and he said you guys shouldn't discuss anything or do any regulations about agriculture. And it sounds like chapter 163 says that nothing about agriculture should be in ULDC. If everybody's in agreement with that, it would be nice if town staff would go through the ULDC, find everything that has to do with agriculture in the ULDC, bring it to the committee, and see if it gets removed from the ULDC.
Beth?
I agree.
Okay, Beck agrees with that. Now,
But more comments on what John said. I like what you're saying, John. I don't know if it's legal. I don't know if it's legal, they tell them, well, you can do it, but we're gonna keep an eye on you, or you have to post all that. That would have to be a question for lawyers. I like what you're saying, especially on these weird oddball deals.
Well, I think that the statute.
Now, here's the cool thing is we get more people coming in all the time with these things, and as you kind of go along, you say, no, 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 the next person comes up, sorry, we've already said no on this.
That's true, we are building up the library
Right,
on the staff.
because these are not black and white ag situations.
Sure.
Let's try and rephrase that then. First you put up the sign that says this is an ag community, here's the door. You can have an ag community, and yes, there are departments that regulate these things, agencies between animal control, the state. So what would you suggest as a safe way to monitor or ensure that ag operations are continuing without creating a big legal mess for the town? You guys deal with this all, ag issues all the time. And I guess that's the question, right?
I don't know, I think there is a lot of agriculture that's as clear as.
Right, and there's something I'll be bringing up in the future that is technically ag, and you think agencies regulate it, but it's something that, I'll be bringing it up in a few months.
Yeah, and the only way that we know about these businesses now is when they come in and make a request
Or they don't, and somebody tells you about
of
it.
the staff and say, can we do this under the town's code? And then we write an opinion. If it's possible that some of these people asking our opinion can just come in and, because they think that they're bona fide ag, just set up their business and do it, and that's it. I think that's happened a lot in town. I'm just trying to figure out, is there a way that we can become aware of what's coming in?
Legal ad.
And become aware of these new businesses and try to address any potential adverse impacts before they happen. That's all I'm trying to get at.
Is that, well, what about having a registry of agricultural, and you pay $5 to have, just something simple, and I don't know if that's a violation of any issue, it's just a
Have
suggestion.
it voluntarily.
Yeah, but then the people that want to opt out don't opt, the guy that wants
Right.
to
Okay.
do something clandestine doesn't register, and then what do you want to do? Okay,
Yeah, you-
I don't have an occupational license because Palm Beach County requires one, and I know by the Right to Farm Act, they can't charge me the fee to be a farmer, so I refuse to do it,
Okay.
okay? So,
All right, so what do you do? It's something
Yeah,
to
but
think
the
about.
idea what you do,
Right,
I'm
but
saying.
as we go through, it's something, something may come to someone, simple, it's probably very simple.
that is the one area of our discussion where the word bona fide comes in. Bona fide has a meaning, okay? Bona fide agricultural activity is growing worms, okay? But when you use the disguise of a bona fide agricultural activity to actually have a waste plant,
Right, which gets to
okay,
Jim's
is
question, how do you
completely
monitor?
different. And how do you, well, you just gotta keep an eye on things. You can't make them come in. The guy that's wants, at least this guy's upfront about it, okay? What about the guy who's going to do that and not be upfront about it, and then you gotta come in later and prove it?
Correct. Well, my question, again, non-ag person, do you allow site visits once a year? Is that a violation? Or every 2 to 3 years? Or do you wait?
Well, let me
for
put it to you
complaint?
another way. The Palm Beach County Tax Appraiser's Office is allowed to set up an inspection, okay? Why can't the town do no, people don't have to go to the Palm Beach County Tax Appraiser's Office to get that standing and still be agriculture and keep doing what they're doing. However, there's no reason why the town can't do a free inspection once a year to make sure a place still is operating as a bona fide agricultural activity and not something else.
Because I don't want them on my property.
And you have to be educated, I'm sorry, but we have an attorney that is, I've said it to I'll say it to Mr. Cirillo. I find sometimes his knowledge of ag is lacking, okay? You have to have someone who's knowledgeable in this and willing to understand what ag is. And it seems to be a difficult issue, but you've got the extension agency to go to as a reference. And again, but like Beck says, especially in Waxahachie grows, and just as a United States citizen, you don't want people on your property, what little rights you have left
Well,
in this country.
there's the perfect question. Does the town have the legal right to ask to inspect a commercial agricultural activity to determine whether or not that's what they're really doing?
We have public continuation of our public comment.
You say, do they have the right to ask? Sure, they can ask. The problem is, do you have to grant it?
No, he said, do they have the right to inspect?
No, he said, do they have the right?
Okay,
Does the town have
so
the right to
I
ask
change it.
if they do an inspection? They could do. Not only that, but why would you need to go out and do an inspection every year if there's no issue?
No.
You're not going to go inspect everybody's bona fide farming operation in Loxahatchee.
No, only if there is an issue.
So if you get complaints, then there would be an inspection?
That's what code enforcement
Well,
is.
isn't that how it
Exactly.
exists? That's what exists now.
Right,
Right.
yeah.
Mhm.
And,
Okay.
I mean, that's the same thing in other communities, and something they fall back
Well,
on
I
is.
didn't expect for us to come up with any.
No, it's
resolution.
good. Mark's not here, we've got you all to
Think about it
ourselves.
over the course of our deliberations, if we can come up with some some fair, reasonable, legal procedures.
The right to farm doesn't restrict itself to a neighbor requesting a nuisance evaluation. The right to farm says nuisance. The town could become aware of something without a formal complaint. And you go out and take a look at it, and if it looks like an operation that there are some questions, you know, I
It
think
would have to
that's
be a
more,
legitimate.
that's more like a legitimate nuisance investigation.
Right, you're talking about a bond, you know, on the other hand, you can have the guy sign something that says, if there's ever the suspicion that you are a waste manufacturing recycling plant,
Yeah, the trust.
rather than doing your bona fide agriculture operation, you agree for us to come and do an inspection and see that the amount of worms you have
But
is
that's the question,
consistent.
Howard, is it legal to do that? That would be a question to the lawyer. Is it legal to tell somebody, hey, you come up with something really weird, now you have to sign this paper that we have a right to check on it? I don't know if that's
It's
legal.
bona fide ag. I don't think it's legal.
And it may be
Well, the
something.
tax appraiser's office has a right to call you up and say, I want to inspect anytime they want.
I know, but we're talking about the town, we're not talking about the county. We're talking about what can this town legally do?
You know what, maybe,
That's the question.
okay, maybe you two just answered the question, is can the town call the tax appraiser's office and say, we're concerned this is not a bona fide?
No, because the tax appraiser's office with this new administration is changing all the
Okay.
rules.
All right, well, let's just,
Okay, well, what
we
about?
may have just, like you said, we've had the discussion, it may exist in the right to farm act.
Here's the other thing, you know, if a guy was really wanting to do something sub rosa, he wouldn't even go to the county and say, I want ag land. He'd just go out there and do it as a business.
And do it.
Yes, like some people in this community.
I have two
But-
questions. Does he own the land? Does he need a realtor? Okay, I guess 3. And is he gonna sell the worms for fishing? Because I really like to fish a lot.
And on your
I
red
don't
colors
have-
are little red wigglers.
I
That's,
like both.
that's what, yes, he's.
Can he sell worms?
He's planning on getting the business to the point where he does sell worms.
And is that?
See, that's legal.
And there you
That's
go.
bona
You
fide
direct him in the direction of.
They can't sell the castings, is what they call the worm crap.
He's not talking about selling those, he wants to use those on
On his
site
own.
to.
But he can't sell the worms.
to-
Perfect, okay,
He
now I
wants
got
to
one
grow
more
his
up.
own corn.
Yeah.
Here's the other thing where a guy's really taking advantage of the situation. You've got a lot of people that own vacant land out here. They don't give a damn about Waxahachie grows. And they've got a low cost basis in that land and they just want to get some dollars.
Right.
They get a tenant in there. The tenant does all these sub rosa things. When the town finally cracks down on them, you know, the most that can happen is that the operation is shut down, the tenant doesn't have any stake in the property,
Right.
and he leaves it on the town to enforce a
And
lien,
clean up.
a lien on the property owner. And, you know, it gets to be a real problem trying to get the money to clean it up. And that's where the bond might come in. But I think that that's the risk that you've got, because you don't always just have property owners that are presenting these schemes. You might get somebody that, you know, is just wanting to go to a desperate landowner who's paying taxes on property. And, you know, it sounds like, you know, this is a way he can get some cash flow, and so he doesn't care about the land.
I mean, we can discuss it more.
Okay. I also just want to get back to, we've discussed a lot on this ag issue, which is a big deal to this town. And it's good, and I will continue to discuss it, but I want to ask Howard, this handout he handed out to us, this last page, we started talking about, I just wanted, Howard, did you finish on here? Did you want to elaborate on anything?
Well, I mean, I believe those are 3 questions that we need an AGO opinion on, because we keep arguing over them
So that was your
continually.
recommendation, you're making a
Yes.
recommendation.
over and over and over and over again. And John, God bless you, I love you, but John will argue both sides of the fence depending on what point he's trying to make. So, you know, we don't have any actual answers to any of these issues that are definitive enough for us to say, this is the way it is and that is that. And I think that needs to be done so we all know where we stand when we're doing stuff. I mean, we sit here and argue points of law that none of us can stand behind, and as Madam Chair said earlier, even our attorney isn't a very sharp pencil in the box when it comes to agriculture. So if we got an AGO opinion,
in trouble. I didn't say that.
I
I
elaborate.
think you said bright bulb in the
Howard
dark.
said.
Very good.
What was it? He wasn't the brightest bulb in the
No,
pack?
whatever, we'll have to watch the video.
But the bottom line is, if we get these 3 questions answered, that would save all of us a hell of a lot of time. That would save town staff a hell of a lot of time.
And that's what we're
Okay.
trying to do, is reduce the because it seems the burden is on the staff constantly, and it just, we're not getting to any decisions.
You come here asking unanswerable questions because if you knew the answer, you would be scratching your head over them, and you can see there is no good answer. But if we get an AGO opinion on this stuff, hey, that's cut and dry. This is where we stand.
Yeah, I'm not asking necessarily your opinions, I'm asking, well, I am asking for your opinion.
You did.
As to whether or not you think that staff should pursue some of these avenues that I suggested tonight, or should we just, as Todd suggested, go through the ULDC and take out every single reference to agriculture, and then that's it?
Well, that's what I said, my
Those
suggestion
are
in
the
the
2
first
ends of the
meeting.
spectrum, I guess.
We all discussed that in the first meeting.
Right, was that my suggestion?
Ag was out.
Anything, ag could not be touched.
Go back and watch like.
Yeah, but
the
not
first
touching
video.
that is not pulling everything out.
Well, that's, and no, I believe I said we should put it in front of the ULDCs, make a statement, because sometimes if you don't define these things and you don't make a statement, then it's up to interpretation. Again, look at the legal issue. We have the same law firm at the beginning of this town, you know, those people had one impression and then it was interpreted in a different way 7 years later. So unless it's in black and white and in writing, again, that's something for us to discuss at the next meeting. Read this, give us your opinion. Okay, John and Katie.
If you go back to the handout I gave at, I think our first meeting, I put the wording in there as an introductory statement. That with respect to agriculture, the town is going to defer to whatever the state statutes are with regard to agriculture. And I think that's the safest thing for the town to do, because then, you know, there are different agencies that have different requirements, and we've already had one of our town attorneys, same firm, different attorney, say that Attorney General opinions are just another legal opinion. They're guidance, but they are not determinative. So if you go back to, as Todd was saying, just take the references out and say, you know, the town defers to all state statutes.
Yeah, let's take a look at that
Agriculture.
first handout, and when we come back to the next meeting,
Yeah.
we can talk about it some more. I think this was a good discussion. Katie, you had something to say?
My question is in reference to Todd. Mark has said that he's gonna present everything to the town council. I know, not this last month, but the month before, he gave them an overview of what we've been doing, but when are they basically going to be making a decision or voting on what we've talked about? So we could put that into effect, you know,
Yeah, well,
take out.
well, the only thing that the committee has made a motion on in terms of specific changes to the code at this point is a special exception, and that's ready to go to council.
Did we just, and that's a good thing to bring up, because we haven't heard, we heard something read at the town council meeting, but we never got clarification on what happened with the equipment. We specifically asked for commercial equipment. I'm trying to remember Beck's wording.
Yeah.
And then that's what we have to be so careful of. Commercial equestrian, what was your wording? Be exempt,
We're taking them completely out.
Take it out.
Be removed from special exceptions.
Yeah,
Yes.
and is that the status?
well. that-
Yeah, how was it, what was the motion? I believe that's
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's
motion
right.
we made.
There's a list of uses in the AR district that require special exception. And we went through, and the committee made some recommendations for changes there, one of which was to allow commercial equestrian operation as a permitted
It's
use,
permitted use, that's the
Without-
phrase.
having to go through special exception process,
Right.
just to permit straight permitted use. Now, that, at this point, that's not,
one of the recommendations is going to go to the council as part of the special exception section of the code itself. I thought we decided, we're going to be going through each of the zoning districts. Each of the districts. That's a recommendation that when we get to the AR district, that recommendation's already been made. So that when we take all of the recommendations that are related to the AR district, that will go with that
Right, my
recommendation.
concern is I don't want to hear it said to the town council that we want commercial equestrian left in special exceptions though. Like when you do present it, I don't want, that they may come away with the impression or P and Z, because does it go to P and Z or does it go to the town council? Who does it go to next? Because I thought we had, it gets presented to P and Z. Okay, I just don't want P and Z to have the impression that we're saying we're okay with commercial equestrian being not permitted, being a special exception until, oh, hey, here, 3 months later, I just want them to be aware that we are asking for it to be a permitted use that will be discussed later in the AR
Okay.
zoning section.
I give you my word that we will.
Because I might be
Yes,
there
I am too.
when that comes up.
And you know Keith Harris will be.
Pardon?
And you know Keith Harris will be.
Oh, yes.
He's on P and Z, so.
Well, I just have to hope he's awake when it happens.
So then when would that be going to the town council
Well,
about taking that?
yeah, that's
Because
right.
it's P and Z.
It's got to go to P and Z first, and,
Okay.
I mean, it's all set to go. It's possible that it could go in August.
Well,
I mean, we're doing
by
a
the
lot
end of the
here,
year, so
and
all this
we'll
stuff
do
has
it,
to
so-
get out of here.
Okay, because this is just a one-year committee, we should be
Right.
done. All right, so Howard and then,
I was out first, but Howard interrupts even with a coupler, so it really doesn't matter.
are you
Yeah,
done?
whenever you interrupt, I like what you say.
Okay, but everyone's,
At the
John,
end of
are
the
you
day,
done?
guys, I don't think Jim came here to, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, I think you guys are questioning if something is ag, not, if it is ag, to allow it or not allow it. Because that's where this vermiculture deal came to be, right?
Yes, well.
He was looking for that window.
Yeah.
Now, like, but I mean, if somebody said, I'm gonna put in a horse farm, do we need to, do you agree that there's no need to go through this window or anything else?
That's
It's an
true.
agricultural.
Yes, I agree.
These are these really weird, so I guess I agree with what Todd said, to get rid of anything that has to do with agriculture. And from the ULDC, this situation, is it or isn't it? And I think that's where it gets confusing and complicated.
And what I would tell you, just that if you have that feeling, please write a letter to the P and Z board in support of that statement. I'll be happy to take the letter to the P and Z board for that meeting.
Now, I didn't mean to imply that every single potential agricultural business would have to go through like some kind of conditional use approval or special exception or site plan or anything.
It's these weird.
There are some uses that have the potential to be pretty noxious and troublesome to the neighbors. And I'm trying to figure out whether or not there is a way that we can try to address those potential issues before they happen.
Okay, I think we're ready to close up. We have one more continuation public comment, and then John. You want to continue your public comment?
Real quick, as you can see, the town staff waits for you guys to vote on something before they act on it. You guys, it seems like all 5 of you are in consensus that anything that's to do with agriculture needs to be removed. You need to vote on it and say this needs to happen for him to proceed.
But well, Mark needs to be present, I think, also.
No.
It's not for us to vote on
No,
it.
I wouldn't,
Mark's not voting on it.
no.
No, I just
You
didn't know
can-
if
you
he needed to be
can
present.
make a motion on any subject that you want.
It sounded like all 5 of you were in agreement with that.
I make a motion that we remove all references to agriculture from the ULDC.
I second. You're fine.
Wait, John was going to say, let's hold off on the final vote. John?
Yeah, I think it's fine to remove the ag references, but I think that we need to keep in the code that any nuisance requirement that applies equally to all activities in the town is not removing an ag reference and that those should stay. And, you know, I think that we've had various agencies in the state agree that, you know, with respect to nuisance and sanitation, that as long as the requirements of the municipality apply equally to operations, whether they're ag or not ag, that those are exempt or not prohibited regulations. So I think as long as that remains, I'm content to have the rest of what is ag, what is not bona fide
Well, we would
ag.
need to amend the motion.
Well, I'm not sure you do, as long as there's an understanding that that's not an ag, that's not a specific ag restriction in the town. And I'd just like to have everybody understand that.
Well,
If
that's
it's a
why I'm looking
nuisance-
for clarification.
Yeah, if it's a nuisance, it stays in. And that's under the right to farm also, because if it's a nuisance in that first year, you can go ahead and claim it. And I think nuisances are things, you know, like odor, like noise, like sanitation. And those elements can be, you know, an issue that is decided completely apart from whether you've got any other requirements in your town code that says this is ag and this is not ag.
Yeah, I disagree with you there, John, because we're basically trying to get away from the ULDC making ag regulations.
That's
And what
not
you're
an ag
talking
regulation,
about,
Howard.
what you're talking about is already in the Right to Farm Act, which basically what governs. So whether or not there's any reference to that in the ULDC doesn't change whether or not you have a year to declare a farm operation a nuisance, and you have a further amount of time if they increase intensity.
As
You
long-
don't need the ULDC mention for that to be applicable.
Let me interrupt for a moment, please. We do have a comment from Kevin Goro on nuisance sanitation. I'd like to hear that. And then I want to back up for a minute here. Kevin?
I agree with Mr. Ryan that we do need to include nuisance and sanitation in the laws for the very purpose of, we're having a problem right now in our canals. They have higher levels of, what's the word, eutrophication, a lot of phosphorus chemicals that are, and in fact, they may end up shutting us off from being able to drain into the C51. So you need to have that ability to abate nuisance or what could be considered sanitation. Meaning if you have a farm and they have an outflow to whatever canal they use, and if you have people that, engineers, etc., that are monitoring it, and they're noticing high levels of material that shouldn't be there, you need to be, if you just exclude it and say, well, ag is this way, then you're excluding the ability to say, wait a minute, you may end up, by what you're pumping out of your farm, may end up costing us by not being able to drain the town entirely. So I think you need to, I agree with Mr. Ryan, you need to be able to, you know, have some way in case something happens. And also just for personal, you know, I mean, if something is really a nuisance, you've got to be able to allow town residents nearby be able to say, this is ridiculous. I know they have the right to farm, but this is, you know, when something's ridiculous, it's ridiculous. You've got to be able to allow the neighbors and people to say, hey, it's too much.
The question is whether the ULDC is the place for that. The town can still go ahead and create an ordinance that addresses that.
All right, let me interrupt.
That's it, that's all I have to say.
John, and then I have something to say.
Yeah, I think nuisance is absolutely something we addressed in the development of the ULDC, and it can be noise, it can be smell. You know, if you've got a chipping and mulching operation right next door and it doesn't comply with all the acre requirements or the setback requirements, you know, that noise isn't, you know, is something that has to fall within certain limits.
And agriculture is not the only use we have in town.
Right.
So we have to have nuisance.
And it's applied to every operation in the town.
I'm going to need direction from Susan here. Previously, about 20 minutes ago, I referred us to the last page, what Howard was talking about. And I'm thinking perhaps, Susan, I don't know if this is the proper way to say it, perhaps we might want to table this motion for now. My question is, if y'all could look
to this last page again, where there were some questions for the AGO. And what I'm wondering, because there's so much involved here, and this involves what we're all focusing on now, item 2. We're discussing nuisance. What I'm wondering, one, there was a motion made, can we table the motion? We can table the motion. 2, do we want to look at this and to get a better direction from our attorney? I realize the AGO is just a legal opinion. And we all know my opinion of attorneys. Okay, I have one in the family, but they can make things as difficult and you can get 20 different answers for them. But we have the AGO opinion available to us. Do we?
Here's the thing, all of these items here are addressed in state statutes. And if we say we're totally deferring to state statutes, we let the state statutes play out.
Yet we have argued incessantly over what the true meaning is of those state statutes,
Right,
which is the reason for
that's what brought
asking
me-
this opinion.
That's not up to us to decide.
Well, see, but listening to, that's what made me, I was just listening, we were all thinking we were on the same page, and then I hear a discourse where I find that there's different opinions, and then I look at this. So what I'm thinking for tonight, let's just table any motions for tonight. Let's just wait, okay? Just go back and look at this, let's go back and review these statutes, okay? And I would like to keep this last page I'd like to bring this last page, the questions for AGO, back
Okay,
to the next.
I need a copy of that.
Oh, yes, I thought you had one.
No,
Okay, the last page, questions for AGO. I'd like us to all to review the Florida statutes. And then I'd like us to continue this discussion. Because I think we've had a good discussion in this one area, but we need to finalize it.
Howard, when we're talking about, or when you're talking, just to get in your brain a little, which is hard to do, when we're saying that we want to get rid of ag in the ULDC, and then John said another thing, that then we're referring back to statutes, is that something we need to consider for next month that we can think, or we have 4 weeks to think about it? To where instead of saying in such a blunt way, we're just going to get rid of all of ag in the ULDC, should we maybe think about, why don't we, anything that refers to ag should be referred back to state statutes, starting with number 1 to 2, and not just, and then that, the nuisance that you're worried about, or that he's talking about, would be covered in that whole deal.
Absolutely, just, you don't
So
put
maybe we just
anything
need to think about
ag
the
in there,
wording
you
on-
just put referred Florida statute.
I think we just need to think about the wording on how to maybe bring up that motion. And then we have 4 weeks to really come
Yeah,
up. You're really good about coming up with the right wording.
And then you got these 3 opinions, which, yes, any other municipality can say, well, that's just another attorney's opinion. However, the municipality that asked for the Attorney General's opinion is by and large considered the one area that has to abide by it.
And-
So
and you're asking-
even though Davey could say, oh, that's just another lawyer's opinion, Loxahatchee Groves wouldn't really have the same freedom.
All right.
Where's your cupboard, Jim? You need a cupboard. Okay, Jim actually has something to say. And then John.
Yeah.
Okay, that was a
Well,
very good point, Becky.
I totally agree with Beck, and as a matter of fact, I was going to suggest that myself. I don't think we should go through the code and every time the word agriculture is in there, just delete it.
Oh, we were so
Now,
close.
there are so many statutes that deal with the issue of agriculture. I think what we should do is go through the code, and when there's a particular issue that relates to a specific statute, we have to try to reference that statute, rather than just make the umbrella statement, refer to Florida statutes, because half the time you can't find them. And if you're going to refer to the statutes, let's refer the reader to the specific section that he needs to look at.
And leave a summary there so that they can actually read something and not have to go to forever.
Okay, John?
Well, I think that's fair, and I think that's useful, because I think that I've already got in mind the state statutes that relate to virtually everything that's here. I think the question over nuisance is as long as that applies to every activity in the grove, that's a completely separate ULDC issue. And I don't want to see that changed.
I totally agree with that.
Okay.
Okay, and I want to remind you that Mark did tell us, because, and I think this is the one topic we might want to do this, because you all have verbalized some excellent points. You can email Mark if you have something, a sentence, or you want, a few sentences that you feel fit the issue, or a comment, please send them to Mark so he can send them out to all of us. You do not respond to that email, but share your thoughts, so when, you know, we come to this next meeting, we're like ready to discuss this and get it over with. Okay? I just think this is the one time where we, you know, because you guys are so close on this, in finalizing this, please send your thoughts to Mark and Jim. We'll get them also. And then if Jim, and one thing, the reason for that is then Jim can direct us, and like, no, that's not what we talked about, or, you know, we look for feedback from you this time on this, like when they send in your questions or their comments, so you can help us finalize this and get this over with. Closing comment? Oh, Howard.
I'm sorry.
And John, you're done, right?
Well, unless Howard goes off.
Okay, Howard, I'm getting, looking for closing comments.
It's gonna be quick, it's gonna be quick.
Okay, and Susan, actually Susan, go ahead, and then we're gonna let Susan speak. And then
Okay,
we're gonna have closing
I
comments.
disagree with you, Jim, on peppering all that stuff in there, relating the Florida statutes, okay? Specifically, as John just said, he's already got all these statutes in mind that should be put in specific sections, but you know that depending which statute you're reading and what part of what, you get completely different opinions. And again, the whole idea is that the Unified Land Development Code should not be the document that people are reading in order to make determinations as in relation to agriculture. That's why I suggested pulling it all out of there. As soon as you start making decisions as to what line and what statute you're going to put in there to reference something, okay, somebody else can find something that seems to conflict with that. And that's where we open up this whole can of worms. It's going to put us right back to where we started from. I'm done.
Okay, and I thought we were just sticking to the Right to Farm Act, but go ahead, Susan.
I just wanted to clarify, you're not giving direction tonight for an AGO opinion?
No, we are not. We are simply saying we'd like this page included in the next agenda, and we're tabling the motion that was brought forth, and we'll discuss it. We'd like it discussed at the beginning of the next meeting, and anyone's free to email Mark with their thoughts, which will be sent to Jim, and he can give us feedback, but we cannot communicate with each other.
What's his name?
Let's go.
I have a life. I don't know what you
I
guys
make a
do.
motion to close the meeting.
Yeah.
Closing comments, John, start from your end.
I think it's been useful.
Great.
Me too.
Okay.
I agree. I think we need to get this settled now.
Yeah, and I think the biggest issue is the ag issue, and I really think, I mean, I thought we were gonna make a motion, but you guys brought up some good points, and we need to
Oh,
just
no, I
think on it
agree.
a little more, and I think you guys are ready to wrap it up. And any comments from the public? To end, okay, Susan? Bree? Jim, you wanna say goodnight?
Good night, Ken.
I think it was a good discussion.
All right, meeting adjourned.
When is our next meeting? I'm sorry.
I guess Braden, do you have an idea, or Susan?